Hey everyone! Ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough for your family? What happens when love is measured in money? Today's story is about Ali, a son who was once rejected by his own parents, until life took an unexpected turn. Let's dive in. I have always believed that family is supposed to love and support each other no matter what. But in my house, love seemed to come with a price tag. My name is Ali, and I come from a middle-class family where money was always a sensitive topic. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. My parents worked hard their entire lives to give me and my sister, Sarah, a better future. Sarah, my elder sister, was always the shining star of our family. She was brilliant in her studies, got a scholarship to study abroad, and later landed a high-paying job in another country. She was financially stable, independent, and most importantly, she sent money home every month. My parents were beyond proud of her. Every time her name came up in a conversation, their faces would light up. My dad would always say, "Alad wo hodi hi jo masai bap ka saharabane." Children are those who become their parents' support. And in their eyes, Sarah was exactly that. I, on the other hand, was just average. I had an ordinary job that paid enough to cover my basic needs, but nothing extraordinary. I wasn't struggling, but I wasn't in a position to send large sums of money home like Sarah did. I loved my parents, and I did what I could for them, but it was never enough. Every time I visited home, the same topic would come up. My mom would casually mention how Sarah had just transferred another huge amount for household expenses. My dad would praise her for being so responsible. And then, their eyes would turn to me. "Ali, you should also start thinking about your parents' happiness," my mom would say, her voice gentle but firm. I would nod, pretending not to feel the weight of her words. I wanted to help, but I simply couldn't afford to send money every month like Sarah. I was still trying to build my own life, but my struggles didn't seem to matter to them. One evening, we were all sitting in the living room when Dad proudly announced that Sarah had just bought a brand new car for him. The excitement in his voice was unmistakable. "She didn't even tell me," he said, his eyes shining with happiness. "She just transferred the money and told me to pick any car I liked." This is what a real child does for her parents. Mom placed a loving hand on his arm. She understands her responsibilities. She knows what makes us happy. I sat quietly, feeling invisible. I wanted to be happy for them, but deep inside, I felt like I was being compared to Sarah yet again. "Ali," Dad suddenly turned to me, "when are you going to do something big for us? You have a job now. You should also think about making your parents proud." I swallowed hard. "Dad, I'm doing my best. My job doesn't pay as much as Sarah's, but..." He waved his hand dismissively. "Excuses, excuses. It's not about how much you earn, it's about how much you care." Mom sighed and shook her head. "Your sister never gives excuses. She just does what needs to be done." Their words stung more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. But in their eyes, love was measured in money, and since I wasn't sending any, I was failing as a son. The excitement in my house was unmatchable. My father's face was glowing with happiness, and my mother was practically beaming. The reason? Sarah had just gifted Dad a brand new car. It happened so suddenly that I didn't even get the chance to process it. One morning, Dad received a phone call from Sarah. He was on the call for barely 5 minutes, but by the time he hung up, his entire mood had changed. "She has done it again," he announced proudly, looking at my mother with pure joy in his eyes. "Sarah just transferred the money. She told me to go pick out any car I want." My mom gasped, covering her mouth as if Sarah had just given them the world. "Really? She's such a gem. Always thinking about us." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "Not just thinking, She's proving it. She didn't even ask, she just sent the money without hesitation. That's what a true child does. I sat in the corner, watching the whole conversation unfold. A heavy feeling settled in my chest, but I stayed quiet. I should have been happy for them, and in some ways, I was. But the way they were talking, as if this was the ultimate sign of love and respect, made me feel like nothing I had ever done mattered. That evening, Dad took my mother to the car showroom. They spent hours selecting the perfect model, something expensive and luxurious, something they could proudly show off to their relatives and neighbors. By the time they came home, their excitement was contagious. Dad could not stop talking about how smooth the drive was, how the leather seats felt, how the features were beyond his expectations. He looked younger than I had seen him in years. And then came the words that stung the most. "My daughter is the pride of this house," Dad declared. "Garkafakar." Mom nodded in agreement. She understands what it means to be responsible. Then, their gaze shifted to me. The atmosphere suddenly changed. The warmth in their eyes disappeared, replaced by something colder. "What about you, Ali?" Dad asked, his voice still holding a trace of excitement but now mixed with curiosity. "When are you going to do something for us?" I had been expecting it. The moment Sarah did something grand, it was inevitable that I would be compared to her. I forced a small smile. "Dad, you know my job doesn't pay that much. I can't afford to buy a car for you right now." Dad's smile faded slightly, but Mom was the one who spoke next. "Dek, tubi kuchban. Tir jitna beta home ka kia fida?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't want to show any emotion. "I am trying, Mom," I said softly. "Trying?" Dad scoffed. "Sarah never said she was trying. She just did it. That's the difference between you two." For the rest of the evening, the conversation revolved around Sarah, how smart she was, how responsible she was, how lucky they were to have a daughter like her. I sat there, listening to all of it, realizing more and more how insignificant I was in their eyes. I didn't need a grand celebration, I didn't need constant praise, but I wished, just for once, that they would look at me and say, "We're proud of you too, Ali." But that moment never came. A few days after Dad got his brand new car, things in the house started to feel different. Or maybe, they had always been this way, and I was just noticing it more now. Every conversation seemed to revolve around Sarah's generosity. Every relative who visited was told the same story, how she had sent the money without even being asked, how she had made Dad proud, how she had proven to be the true child of the house. It was like a never-ending loop, and I was just a background character in it. Then, one evening, as we all sat in the living room, Dad suddenly turned to me with a serious expression. "Ali," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking. It's time for you to do something for this family." I looked up, already feeling uneasy. "What do you mean, Dad?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You should also buy us a car." For a moment, I thought he was joking. But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. "A car?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad nodded. "We're not asking you to send money every month like Sarah. Basak bar hamari kushi ka sak. Ek gif dina chahi namasai bap ko?" I felt my heart drop. "Dad, I can't afford that." Mom sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "Pata viehi bolega." I felt my throat tighten. "It's not about not wanting to, Mom. It's just that my salary isn't that high. I barely manage my own expenses. A car it's too much." Dad's expression hardened. "Sarah eni toek bar nahi kaha. She just did it." "That's because she earns more, Dad," I said, trying to stay calm. She's in a completely different financial situation. So? Dad shrugged. Agar kar dia, to tuhi bi karna chahi. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like my words weren't even registering in his mind. He wasn't asking me if I could do it, he was telling me that I had to. Sarah, who had been scrolling through her phone the entire time, suddenly looked up and smirked. Ali, if you're not capable, just say it. Bezati mat karwayo. I turned to her, feeling a fresh wave of frustration. Sarah, it's not about capability. It's about reality. I don't have the kind of money you do. She shrugged. Then work harder. Her words stung, not just because they were dismissive, but because they echoed what my parents believed. In their eyes, if I wasn't able to do what Sarah had done, it wasn't because of financial constraints, it was because I simply wasn't trying hard enough. Dad leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. His disappointment was written all over his face. I thought you would understand. But maybe we expected too much from you. The weight of those words settled heavily on my chest. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to make them see that I wasn't a failure. But no matter what I said, I knew it wouldn't change anything. In their eyes, I had already lost. Dinner that night was supposed to be a normal family meal. Mom had cooked everyone's favorite dishes, and the table was full of warm food and fresh bread. But the warmth in the room was missing. Instead, there was a tension so thick that it made every bite harder to swallow. I sat in my usual seat, quietly eating, trying to avoid eye contact. I already knew where this conversation was going to go. Ever since the talk about the car, things had been colder between me and my parents. Mom barely spoke to me unless necessary, and Dad hadn't looked at me the same way since I refused to buy them a car like Sarah. Sarah, on the other hand, was the center of attention as usual. She had just finished telling a story about her workplace, where she had impressed her boss with some big project. Dad was smiling proudly. Yeah, hodi hi kabiliyat, he said, shaking his head in admiration. Apni menet esiage badna or masai bap ka nam roshan karna. Mom nodded in agreement. Sarah ko de ko, himari shanghai. Jishi cheese ki shikayat nahi kardi. Bas kardi hai, bina jishi bahing ku. I took another bite of my food, pretending not to hear. But I could feel their eyes shifting toward me. Then, Dad put down his spoon and looked directly at me. Ali, tui sharem nahi adi? His voice was calm, but I could hear the anger underneath. I swallowed hard. Sharim kisbat ki, Dad? Dad scoffed. Saraku achievements sun ku bi tera dimak nahi kolta? Tui hum surf kane kulia palada? The words hit me like a slap. The food in my mouth suddenly tasted like nothing. I placed my spoon down, my appetite disappearing instantly. Dad, isa kyun kh rahi hain? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. To or kia kahun? Teri umar kulog apni masai bap kizindagi sanwar rahi hain, garbana rahi hain, onko sukunda rahi hain. Or two. Surf sans laraha hai. Tui kabi yamasus bihora hai kutir home ka fida kia hai? I felt something break inside me. I knew my parents weren't happy with me, but to hear my own father say this in front of everyone, it was something else. Sarah let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Dad, rendu. Kuch log surf apni zindagi kuliye jeet hain. Sabki andarat himat nahi hodi kuwo dusran ka sak sakian. I clenched my fists under the table. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, to scream that I was doing my best. But what was the point? No one here would listen. Mom sighed dramatically. Ali, ek bop bata. Jo and san apni masai bap ka nahi hosaka, wo ji shi or ka kia haga? Tara kia haga klko? Tu kabi ji shi ka gar nahi basa sakega, jab apni masai bap ka nahi hua. That was it. That was the moment I felt something inside me shatter completely. I had heard taunts before. I had been compared to Sarah my entire life. But this? This was different. They weren't just saying I was a disappointment. They were saying I wasn't even worthy of love, of a future, of a life beyond this. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my throat tightening as I forced myself to keep my emotions locked inside. But I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, staring at my plate, my food untouched, listening to them tear me apart as if I wasn't even there. The silence after Mom's words was suffocating. I sat there, staring at my plate, trying to process everything that had just been said. My own family, my own parents, believed I was worthless. That I would never be able to build a home, never be able to take care of anyone, just because I couldn't send them money like Sarah. But I stayed quiet. Because I knew that no matter what I said, it wouldn't make a difference. Dad pushed his plate away, as if losing his appetite just from looking at me. He shook his head, disappointment clear in his eyes. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. Ali, tu abtak nahi samja, hai na? His voice was calm, but it held an edge of finality. Hum tu hi force nahi kar rahi. Basek simple bot keh rahi hain, jab tak tu apni akat dikain layak nahi hoda, tu hamara beta nahi hai. I felt the air leave my lungs. The words were so sharp, so brutal, that for a moment, I thought I had misheard. But the coldness in Dad's eyes told me that he meant every single word. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, aap isa kais kh sokt hain? He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he had already made his decision. Mui ya bot kain main duk ho raha hai, Ali. Lekin tui dek kus surf afsos hoda hai. Tara hona na hona ek jaisa hai. Jab tak tu apni masai bap kulia kuch kar nahi sakta, jab tak tu kuch ban nahi jada, tu is gar ka hisa nahi hai. I blinked, trying to hold back the sting of tears. I wanted to say something, to ask if all these years meant nothing, if every little thing I had done for them, even in small ways, had no value at all. But before I could even gather my thoughts, Sarah let out a small laugh from across the table. Itna bi kia buralaga, Ali, she said, tilting her head mockingly. Agar ya bot pazan nahi ayi, to simple solution hai na? Paisa kama kubejna shuro card na. She said it so easily, as if money was the only measure of love. As if I was nothing more than a bank account that hadn't started depositing funds yet. I turned to look at her, my fists clenched under the table. Sarah, tum lagta hai paisa sab kuch hai. She shrugged. Nahi. Lekin tumher jay's logo kuliya hai. Agar tumher pas paisa nahi hai, to tumher pas or hai kia? Dad nodded in agreement. Sarah sahi kh rahi hai. Hum tui surf ek cheese mangi tea, or tu wo bi nahi dasakta. Matlab tui yahan ren ka bi koi hak nahi hai. I looked at Mom, hoping, just hoping, that she would say something, that she would stop Dad, that she would at least soften his words. But she didn't. She just sat there, her eyes avoiding mine, her silence louder than anything she could have said. That was when I realized. They had already decided. I had already lost. I was no longer welcome here. I took a deep breath and stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Thik hai, Dad, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. Agar paisa hai sab kuch hai, agar surf bank balance decide karta hai ko kaun masai bap ka beta hai or kaun nahi, to for mui yahan ren ki zerorat nahi. Dad didn't say anything. He just nodded, as if this was the decision he had been waiting for. Mom still didn't look at me. And Sarah? She just smirked. Chalo, ACHA hi. Obshayed tu seek j life ka sabs lesson. I didn't respond. I turned, walked to my room, and started packing my things. The room was small, just a single bed, a tiny wooden table, and a flickering bulb that barely lit up the space. The walls had stains from old water leaks, and the window was too small to let in much air. But this was home now. This was all I could afford. After Dad threw me out, I had nowhere to go. I spent my first night outside, sitting on a bench near a closed shop, staring at the dark sky, wondering if this was really happening. Was I really homeless? Did my own parents just disown me over money? The next morning, I found a cheap hostel room to rent. It wasn't much, but at least it had a roof. I had a small savings account, but without any financial support, I knew it wouldn't last long. I had to be careful. Life had never felt this lonely before. In my parents' house, even when they criticized me, at least there was noise, movement, people around. Here, there was only silence. And my own thoughts. And those thoughts were the worst part. Every night, as I lay on the hard mattress, staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed everything. Tui surf kane kulia palava. Jab tak tu paisa kama kubejna shuru nahi karta, tu hamara beta nahi. Jo and san apni masai bap ka nahi hosaka, wo jishi ka nahi hosakta. Their words echoed in my head, over and over, until I could barely breathe. I had never felt this broken before. It wasn't just the financial struggle, it was the betrayal, the pain of knowing that no matter what I had done in life, it had never been enough for them. I started losing sleep. I would close my eyes, and instead of rest, memories would haunt me. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, my chest feeling heavy. Days were tough, but nights were unbearable. Food became an afterthought. Sometimes, I would go a whole day without eating, simply because I didn't feel like I deserved to. Money was tight. My salary was already low, and now I had to pay rent, bills, and food expenses all on my own. I couldn't afford the little comforts I used to have at home, no home-cooked meals, no fresh clothes neatly folded by Mom, no random snacks waiting in the kitchen. Everything had to be calculated now. Every rupee spent had to have a purpose. I started walking instead of taking the bus to save fare. I ate the cheapest meals, mostly bread and tea. I avoided socializing because even meeting friends meant spending money I didn't have. And the worst part? No one from my family called me. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Sarah. I had thought, maybe, just maybe, after a few days, Mom would at least call to check on me. Maybe she would ask if I had eaten, if I was okay, if I had found a place to stay. But there was nothing. It was as if I had never existed. I would pick up my phone sometimes, staring at the screen, hoping for a message, a missed call, anything. But all I ever saw were silence and empty notifications. The pain of knowing that my own family had erased me from their lives was heavier than any financial burden I was facing. I started feeling numb. Depression isn't just sadness. It's waking up and feeling like there's no reason to move. It's losing interest in everything you once enjoyed. It's looking in the mirror and not recognizing yourself anymore. Some days, I would go to work, finish my shift, come home, and just sit in the dark for hours. No TV, no music, nothing. Just silence. Because what was the point? Who was I even working for anymore? For the first time in my life, I truly understood what loneliness felt like. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The pain of my family's betrayal was still there, but something inside me had changed. I had spent enough nights lying awake, wondering why my own parents had thrown me out. I had wasted enough days feeling sorry for myself. But now, I realized something: no one was coming to save me. If I wanted a better life, I had to build it myself. One evening, as I sat in my small rented room, staring at my near-empty bank account, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living paycheck to paycheck. I needed something bigger, something that could actually change my life. That's when an idea struck me. At my workplace, I had noticed a common problem: small businesses struggled to get their products online. Many shopkeepers didn't know how to sell digitally, and most of them relied on walk-in customers. But after the pandemic, things had changed. More and more people wanted to buy online. I realized that if I could help small businesses set up online stores, I could create something valuable. I started researching late at night, watching free business courses on YouTube, reading articles, and learning how e-commerce platforms worked. I had no money to invest, but I had time, and I was willing to put in the effort. The first few weeks were frustrating. I reached out to several shop owners, trying to convince them to let me set up an online store for them, but most of them didn't take me seriously. Koi online nahi karid to buy, yes sab bakwas hai, one shopkeeper told me. Another laughed, agarit na san hoda, sab karlit. I was rejected again and again. But I didn't stop. One day, I met an old man who owned a small clothing store. He was struggling because bigger brands were taking away his customers. I explained my idea to him, and for the first time, someone listened. Beta, agar yasach main kam care to mui bateo, he said. I promised him results, even though I had no idea if it would work. For the next 2 weeks, I worked day and night to create a basic online store for him. I took pictures of his clothes, wrote descriptions, and set up social media pages. Then, I used whatever small savings I had left to run a few ads. And then, something incredible happened. He made his first online sale. It was just a single order, but for me, it was everything. The shopkeeper was so happy that he told his friends about me. Soon, other small business owners started reaching out. They had seen his success and wanted the same for themselves. Within a few months, I was working with multiple shopkeepers, helping them set up their online presence. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was growing. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Success didn't come overnight. There were still tough days, moments of doubt, times when I wanted to give up. But every time I felt like quitting, I remembered Dad's words, Jab tak tu kuchban nahi jada, tu is gar ka hisa nahi hai. And I used that pain to push myself forward. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Sarah. Because now, I didn't need their approval anymore. I was building my own life, on my own terms. Months had passed since I last spoke to my family. In all this time, not once had they called to ask if I was okay, if I was even alive. I had stopped expecting anything from them. But then, one evening, my phone rang. I was in the middle of work, finalizing a deal with a new client when I saw the name flash on my screen. Mom. For a moment, I just stared at it, unsure if I should even pick up. My heart pounded. Why now? After all this time, why was she calling? Something inside me told me to ignore it. But another part, the part that still, despite everything, wanted to hear her voice, couldn't resist. I answered. Hello? My voice was flat, emotionless. There was silence for a few seconds. Then, I heard a shaky breath. Beta. Mom's voice was different this time. It wasn't filled with taunts or disappointment. It sounded weak, tired, almost desperate. I felt a lump in my throat, but I stayed silent. Beta, bot son, she continued, tear dad by Marhane. I closed my eyes. I wasn't sure how to feel. This was the man who had thrown me out, who had told me I wasn't his son anymore. And now, suddenly, I mattered again? What happened? I finally asked, keeping my voice neutral. Mom sniffled. Unka health bahut down ho gaya hai. Dr. Keh Rahi Hain ko unhi proper treatment ki zerorat hai, or Sarah, she stopped. I frowned. Sarah Kia? She hesitated before speaking. Sarah financially struggle kar rahi hai. Uski job chal nahi rahi, or garko karch sambhalna mushkil ho raha hai. Ah. So that was it. They didn't need me. They needed my money. A bitter smile formed on my lips. The same parents who had once told me I was useless without money were now calling me because their golden child, Sarah, couldn't handle the burden alone. Ali, Beta. Mom's voice cracked. Abgar ko teri zerorat hai. For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at the wall, processing everything. Dad had spent years teaching me that money was everything. That without it, I was nothing. But now, in his weakest moment, he was realizing the truth. Paisa sab kuch nahi hoda. I took a deep breath and finally spoke. Mui sakni do, Mom. And then, for the first time in my life, I had the power to decide. As I stepped into the house after all these months, nothing had changed, except me. Dad sat on the sofa, looking weaker than before. The same man who once spoke with power and authority now looked at me with guilt in his eyes. Beta, Maf Karda, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him, my heart heavy. Jab mui zerorati, tab apki pas surf tanethe, I said, my voice calm but firm. Main counts a Beta Bannon? Dad lowered his gaze, ashamed. For the first time, he had no answer. Silence filled the room. Mom's eyes were full of tears, Dad looked down, ashamed, and even Sarah, who once mocked me, now stood quietly, guilt on her face. I had waited for this moment, the moment they'd realize my worth. But now that it was here, I felt empty. Could I forgive them? Or was it too late? I took a deep breath, looking at the people who once abandoned me. My decision would change everything. I finally spoke. My value was never in money, and if you only see me now because I have it, then I don't belong here.